In a place called Transylvania, a creature of consummate evil has survived half a millennia and shows no signs of declining. He began as a medieval prince, and the castles from which he reigned tell a tale of unspeakable horror. Join us as we explore the harrowing haunts of Vlad Tepes, the real-life inspiration for Bram Stoker's Dracula, next on Great Castles of Europe. Romania's Carpathian Mountains. This chilling wilderness on Europe's eastern frontier marks the border of a kingdom caught between history and horror. It used to be known as the land beyond the forest, Transylvania. Here, since the Middle Ages, stories of supernatural evil have thrived among its peasants, of a devil who grows stronger through abominable acts, and a region of darkness untouched by God. In the late 19th century, the Irish writer Bram Stoker became fascinated by these rumors. Trying to give this evil a name, he came to Transylvania. According to many accounts, he traced the rumors to the town of Brasov and a fortress of mysterious beauty known as Bran Castle. The locals refer to Bran as Dracula's castle. Since Stoker's novel was first published in 1897, droves of tourists have sought the creature's origins here. Romanian travel guides encourage it. For lovers of the macabre, the castle has become a site of homage. Yet the troubled spirit connected to this place is far more peculiar than most vampire seekers know. In life, his haunts included several castles. Among them, Bran is guilty by association, but mostly untainted by evil. The same cannot be said of the human inspiration for Stoker's Prince of Darkness. He was Vlad Tepes, literally Vlad the Impaler. In the middle of the 15th century, he was the Prince of Wallachia, a small buffer state caught up in the vicious wars between Hungary and the Ottoman Empire of the Turks. For a time, this Wallachian prince was a hero, a medieval knight, commended by the Pope himself for repelling the heathen invaders who threatened Europe. Yet history remembers him as a crusader whose time had passed, and for a reign of terror more disturbing than fiction. Vlad Tepes was born in Transylvania in 1431, the year Joan of Arc was burned at the stake, the twilight of the Age of Crusades. He was heir to the throne of neighboring Wallachia in a lineage founded by his grandfather Mircea the Great, crowned in 1386. From the tender age of 7, Vlad was tutored in the discipline of knighthood and the obligations of the Wallachian crown. His father had been named a Knight of the Order of the Dragon by the Holy Roman Emperor. For this, he bore the name Dragon, or Dracula. As his son, Vlad was sworn from birth to take up the sword for Christ. For nobles in these decades of peril, knighthood was no quaint tradition. It meant survival itself. the fearless horsemen of the Ottoman sultans swept steadily west in a chain of victories seemingly destined to swallow Europe. In 1453, the death knell of Christendom would roar across the continent, the fall of Constantinople. At just 14, Vlad himself was captured by the dreaded Turks while on a campaign across the Danube. For 4 long years, the boy was held to ensure an end to his father's raids. From his captors, Vlad learned contempt for life and the many uses of terror. With Dracula's son in chains, Wallachia was a mere stepping stone to the great empire of Hungary. The Ottomans raided its rich trade routes, preparing for their final thrust into Europe. Under the Muslim sword, all of Wallachia cried out for a savior. Brasov was the region's greatest prize, the crossroads for all trade passing between Europe and Asia Minor. In 1395, Vlad's own grandfather Mircea had won Brasov the right to charge a 3% tax on goods coming through the pass. From this tariff, Brasov's class of German merchants grew rich. In charge of enforcing the tariff and protecting the trade route was the magnificent castle Braun. Braun began as a crusader's fortress, built in the 12th century to repel Muslim invaders, using Brasov Pass to break through to Europe. Its life as a toll castle began with Mircea, who presented the fortress to Brasov, Transylvania. Braun's soldiers guarded passage of trade and collected the town's share of revenue. A constant stream of cotton, spices, and produce ensured Brasov's prosperity.
Aici ce are porumb, ori, toate, 800.
Despite havoc wrought by the Turks, the town's rich merchants, called boyars, grew arrogant and greedy under the protection of imposing Braun. Befitting its role as a soldier's garrison, Braun has an interior that is stately and Spartan. The ground plan consists of 4 towers around an irregularly shaped courtyard. No more than 30 soldiers lived here at a time. In emergencies, a larger army could be mobilized from Brasov. To protect those inside, the roofs of the inner courtyard are steeply sloped. Enemy artillery was deflected away instead of penetrating the living quarters. The chaotic layout of Braun's towers and multi-level battlements derives from the castle's foundation. It was shaped to fit the rock on which the castle is built. The living mountain extends into Braun itself, remodeled in more recent times to serve as a vacation home for Romanian royalty. But Braun was too isolated. It probably held too many memories of the other royal family who controlled it 600 years ago. This is the document with which Vlad Tepes's grandfather, Mircea, granted power and privileges to Brasov and its protector, Castle Braun. In 1456, after years of imprisonment and exile, Wallachia's princely protector was about to take the throne. Vlad Tepes's coronation took place here, at the ruined castle Târgovista, Wallachia's capital and power center for the heirs of Mircea the Great. In the castle's great hall, Vlad, like his father and grandfather before him, was crowned Prince of Wallachia. High Christian pomp accompanied the crowning. From his ancestral palace Târgovista, Vlad would carry out most of his reign. Now, as the knight accepted the crown, the Turkish menace was at its peak. Vlad would become a folk hero in Wallachia for making the Turks pay for their crimes. But before launching his holy war, the prince had a grudge to settle with the region's aristocratic boyars. In his view, their influence threatened Wallachia's independence. He invited them to a celebration. The region's most prominent citizens attended, imagining that the young monarch sought their favor. Spirits ran high as they toasted their new puppet prince. Vlad had other plans. Accompanied by his personal army, he led the old and infirm to a public square. There, his soldiers impaled them on stakes driven into the ground. Before the elders had died from the excruciating torture, he forced the younger boyars, both men and women, on a 50-mile march to this eagle's nest high in the Carpathians. With them, Vlad made a human chain, reaching from the Arjus River to the site of the now ruined castle Poyenar. There, his grandfather, Mircea, had built a foundation. With the nobles as slave labor, Vlad completed it. By then, 200 boyars would all be dead, impaled, killed by frost, or fallen from the Carpathian summit. As his reign began, Poyenar was Vlad's hideout, manned by soldiers numbering in the hundreds. Its walls were reinforced with brick to withstand cannon fire from the enemies he would make as prince. Now just 25, Vlad's plans for Wallachia and himself were truly visionary. From his castle strongholds, the courageous prince intended to win Wallachian independence from the empires that dominated it, Hungary and the Ottoman Turks. A free nation would emerge, unlike any in Europe, until the Middle Renaissance. The prince, whose official seals are seen here, would be accepted as a great European ruler. Wallachia would be free of its tormentors. Central to Vlad's goal were commercial toll castles like Braun. For Vlad, the revenue they protected was the other key to his small kingdom's independence. Vlad enforced law and order on the region's trade routes by punishing thieves with impalement. His use of terror began to seem arbitrary, even sadistic. Within 50 years, the Italian Niccolò Machiavelli would coach European monarchs in the judicious use of violence with his book, The Prince. Some claim Tepish was the inspiration for the classic treatise on power. But Machiavelli never went this far. Around 1458, Tepish began the years of raids that brought him fame as the Cross's staunchest defender. His personal war against the Turks was characterized by lightning attacks, reckless bravery in battle, and savagery that awed allies and foes alike. At the start of this era, Pope Pius II praised the Christian Crusaders' successes. By its end, Rome and the civilized world had distanced themselves from the uncontrollable prince on their frontier. In 1461, after a raid on the Turkish fortress Giurgiu, Vlad took thousands of Turks prisoner. These, along with up to 20,000 Germans, Bulgarians, and even Wallachians, he impaled on high stakes near his capital, Târgovista. When the Ottoman Sultan Muhammad II arrived for battle months later, the horrifying forest of corpses was still there. He turned his armies around, saying, "What can we do against a man capable of this?" By 1460, the Turks had a special name for the son of Dracula, Kaziklubev, the Impaler. Yet the prince's excesses weren't saved for Turks alone. He impaled foreign ambassadors for imagined insults, German students accused of spying, lovers for alleged infidelity. By the end of his reign, he'd murdered 100,000 of his own countrymen, a full 1/5 of the Wallachian population. One harrowing account is backed by Russian, German, and Romanian sources. According to them, Vlad invited hundreds of Wallachian sick and poor to a lavish banquet near Târgovista. When the prince asked what else would please them, they answered, "Relief from our pain and want." Vlad ordered the hall locked from outside and set on fire. By 1462, King Matthias of Hungary had heard enough. Wallachia was a principality in his domain. The Impaler was his burden. He ordered his generals to seize Tepish at any cost. But now Vlad was headed for them. With a small band of followers, he had fled Wallachia and was on the run to Transylvania, with the legions of Mohammed the Conqueror hard on his heels. They crossed the Danube, then this bluff, their horses shod backwards to throw off pursuers. Tepish no doubt was overjoyed to see the armies of his old ally, Matthias. He may even have thought they had come as reinforcements. Instead, they put the madman in chains. He was imprisoned somewhere in Transylvania, perhaps even Braun Castle. His second internment lasted 12 years, and during this time, the trail of Vlad Tepish, the historical Dracula, grows dim. Historical records indicate he returned to the throne to help Matthias repel another wave of Ottoman invaders. Other sources claim he died in his mountain prison or escaped. At Braun Castle, he might have used one of the fortress's little-known features, a secret passage Vlad copied at his castle Poyanar. In Braun's inner courtyard, hidden beneath a well, is a steep staircase. If Vlad used it, he would have emerged in the forest below the castle. This could account for atrocities attributed to him during his years in prison and long after his supposed death. It's likely that Vlad died as he lived, around 1477, in a final battle against the Turks. His head, some claim, was sent to the Sultan, proof that the Impaler was dead. But because of his deeds in life, Wallachians had a hard time accepting his death. Rumors of his nocturnal murders continued. Soon the legend of the Impaler merged with tales of that particularly Eastern European creature, the vampire. Long before Vlad's time, peasants strung garlic from the doors of their homes. Burial sites were surrounded by stakes to ensure safety from a rapacious evil that survived beyond the grave. German publishers fueled the Impaler's fame. As early as 1499, pamphlets appeared recounting the prince's barbarity against Wallachia's boyars. By now, the Impaler had taken on the chilling name he's known by today, Dracula, meaning both son of Dracul and the devil. Not even the prince's burial brought relief to the region's peasantry. This is Snagov Lake in Wallachia, now Romania. On its uninhabited island, just one structure exists, a monastery containing the tomb of Dracula. At the height of his career, Dracula had the monastery erected that it might somehow atone for his sins. Inside is a single grave, horrifyingly empty. In this century, repeated excavations have turned up only fragments. The implications are all too clear. According to legend, on the day he was buried, a fierce storm raged. The wind tore the chapel from its foundation and blew it into the lake. To this day, peasants say that whenever the waters of Snagov get agitated, one can hear the chapel bell tolling at the bottom of the lake. This is what Bron Castle looked like in the years Bram Stoker could have seen it, as the 19th century shuddered to a close. If Stoker used Bron as a model for Dracula's castle, he exaggerated its features, but captured its essence. His character, Jonathan Harker, writes, "All of a sudden I was aware that the driver was holding the horses on the court of a vast ruin of a castle. We saw it in all its grandeur, perched 1,000 feet on the summit of a sheer precipice. There was something wild and uncanny about the place." Stoker's genius lay in reuniting Romanian and German folk tales with their source, the historical Dracula. Were it not for the novel's phenomenal success, Stoker and his other tales of horror might have remained anonymous. Yet it is hard to believe that the otherworldly character of this part of Romania would have stayed out of sight forever. Somehow the legacy of the medieval Wallachian prince would have exerted itself. Bram Stoker's Professor Van Helsing describes the vampire in terms that make a fitting epitaph for the real-life Prince of Darkness. "The undead do not die like a bee when he sting once. His cunning be the growth of ages. He is only stronger, and being stronger has yet more power to work evil."